Throughout this series, we've talked about teams from the 2020s, the 2010s, the 2000s, the 90s, but we've yet to talk about a team that just basically no longer exists. And that's what we're going to be doing today, because we're going to be talking about the 1996 Seattle Supersonics.
A team built around Gary Payton, one of the best perimeter defenders of all time. You had Shawn Kemp, one of the best dunkers of all time. You also had a really solid, underrated supporting cast. Detlef Schrempf, Sam Perkins, Hershey Hawkins. Only problem is they ran into the 72 win Bulls.
Before we start talking about the 1996 Seattle Supersonics, please give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on any new videos.
So obviously, like we said, this team was built around mainly Shawn Kemp and Gary Payton. They drafted Shawn Kemp 17th overall in the 1989 NBA draft. Funny story about Kemp though, didn't play a single minute at college. He was enrolled to play at Kentucky, but he left the team after he was accused of pawning off 2 gold chains that belonged to some of his teammates.
251.
You know what, forget it.
He then transferred to community college, where he also didn't play for some reason, and we tried to find out why. Like, the community college he went to still lists him on their website as, like, Cardinals that played in the pros, but he never played a minute for them.
Yeah, that's so funny they still got him on the website, though.
I mean, when you're a small college like that, claim whoever you can. They also had Nick Van Exel on that list, but, like, if you can claim Shawn Kemp, do it.
I mean, clearly the dude could still hoop because he was drafted 17th overall, and great pick by the Seattle Supersonics. You got the 17th pick, you're just like, might as well. We'll take a chance on this dude. Next player of the core, obviously Gary Payton. We all know him. He was drafted 2nd overall, and the Sonics got lucky as hell because they won 41 games the year prior with the rookie Shawn Kemp. They barely missed out in the playoffs. They had a 3% chance of getting the 2nd overall pick, and they did, and they drafted Gary Payton out of Oregon State. Shout out to the Beavers. I have no idea why he went there, but he did. And what a great selection by the Seattle Supersonics. Definitely the best player in the draft this year.
Yeah, definitely. I will say, though, when you said shout out Oregon State, no one could see it, but I gave a big old-fashioned eye roll to that.
I mean,
but you know what? I'll give him credit for that. And the man who would run the show from the sidelines was good old George Karl, who joined the team in the middle of the 1992 season. After he took over, the Sonics finished their season 27-15, but it's gotta be said, this dude's an asshole.
He is. I mean, remember the DeMarcus Cousins thing? There was like the snake tweet he put out. Other players will talk about Kendall Gill hated him. I don't think he has the best relationship with Melo. Some of the stuff I've just heard him say about former players, incredibly disrespectful. And I honestly kind of hate George Karl for it, but the record speaks for itself. When he took over, he completely turned this team around.
Also, just a fun little note, Dwayne Casey and Terry Stotts were both assistants on this team.
I love that.
I love stuff like that, right?
Also, of course, like we said in the intro, they had Sam Perkins. This dude was straight up ahead of his time. They traded for him in the 1993 season. They sent out Benoit Benjamin or Benoit Benjamin. I don't know how you pronounce it.
I think it's Benoit.
Yeah, I don't know. And Doug Christie as well. This was a rookie Doug Christie, so obviously he turned into a great defensive player himself. We talked about him before in the Kings video, but at the time it was great to pick up a guy in Sam Perkins who had playoff experience and just had a strap as a 6'9" center. Like I said, way ahead of his time.
They also grabbed Detlef Schrempf at the beginning of the 1993 NBA season. They traded away Derek McKee. This guy was a 2-time Sixth Man of the Year winner in Indiana. He was coming off an All-Star season the year prior. Just a really crafty guy who could score from all parts of the court. A really good shooter, a good passer. Just a guy you want on your team.
Hershey Hawkins was the last member of the starting 5. They acquired him during the 1995 offseason. Like I just mentioned, Kendall Gill and George Karl did not like each other. Kendall Gill thought he wasn't getting enough play in time, so they traded out Kendall Gill to get Hawkins. Maybe a bit of a downgrade in terms of the player department, but it fixed a lot of their chemistry issues.
Shout out Hershey Hawkins, gold beast in 2K13 or 14. I think it was 13.
Dude would hit everything.
He did.
So unlike some of the teams we've talked about already in this series, this Sonics team was not a one-hit wonder. They had a solid 6 years under George Karl where they were a really good team. Their worst season during that span was 55 wins. So let's go over some of the years, starting with 1993. This was their first full season under George Karl. They won 55 games, good enough for the 3rd seed. They beat the Jazz in 5 in the first round. They beat Hakeem and the Rockets in a close 7-game series in the next round. But in the Western Conference Finals, they ran into Charles Barkley and the Suns. We already talked about them in the 93 Suns video. Charles was just different during this playoff.
Charles was different. You know, people forget about it because he's such a goofball on TV, but Charles Barkley in his prime was a hooper.
The Sonics did all they could. They forced the Suns to 7, but it just wasn't enough. And funny fact about this series, this is where Gary Payton got the nickname The Glove. His cousin just called him up out of nowhere and he's like, Glove, you had Kevin Johnson, like a baseball and a glove. Which, I guess, I mean,
sure.
Yeah, it worked. It just stuck from there, so.
It's a great nickname.
It is an iconic nickname.
It fits him perfectly, too. Like we said, though, the series went a full 7, but the Suns held on. They advanced to their first NBA Finals. But you know what? A great year for the Sonics. And the next year, Michael Jordan retires. So everyone in the league is like, it is wide open. The bad man is gone. He can't hurt us anymore. And the Sonics, they took advantage. They won 63 games. They had the best record in the Western Conference. They went up 2-0 on the Denver Nuggets in the first round and then bottled it.
You go up 2-0, and then you lose 3 straight to lose to the Nuggets. We all remember, well, I guess we don't remember because we weren't alive.
We've seen.
Yeah, we've all seen the iconic shot of Mutombo just on the ground, holding the ball, just in complete jubilation for winning the series. God, what just a massive by the Sonics. You had your chance, and then you become the first seed in NBA history to lose to an ace seed.
So you come off that devastating loss, you're going into the 1995 season, and this season was a little bit bizarre because the Sonics, they had to play all their home games at the Tacoma Dome while Key Arena was being renovated. Now, Tacoma, for anyone who doesn't know the Seattle metro area, is a 40-minute drive from Seattle. So, bit frustrating for players and fans alike. Even still, they won 57 games, they got the 4th seed, they matched up with the Lakers, they won the first game in the series, and then again, dropped 3 straight to a Lakers team that was led by Cedric Ceballos, old Vlade Divac, Eddie Jones, like just a whatever Lakers team.
Yeah, another series they should have won. And at this point, they had the reputation of being playoff chokers. Like, yeah, they went to the Western Conference Finals. They nearly made the finals in 93, but then you become the first seed to lose to an ace seed. And then again, you go out in the first round. So George Karl, you know, he was a little bit on the hot seat, but he kept his job. They didn't make any massive roster changes. They did send out Kendall Gill because, like I said earlier, him and George Karl hated each other. But like I said, they just had that reputation at this point of being playoff chokers. So now going into the 95-96 season, you know, the Sonics didn't make any major roster moves, but they did make some moves to the branding. They had a new logo for the first time in 20 years. I love this logo. You have the Space Needle, you have the big ass Sonics lettering. 90s logos and jerseys are just so great as a whole, but this one is fire.
Yeah, they had a brand new arena to match it, and I just gotta say, it's a travesty they only stuck with this scheme for 5 years.
Yeah, I don't get why did they change it up?
It was so good.
Also had those new jerseys with the big lettering.
They're beautiful.
Yeah, a perfect rebrand. Everything was going right. Everything's new.
And then they started the season 6-5.
Yeah, not the best look. Things would get better though. They beat the Bulls in November. Gary Payton would strip Jordan to seal the game. A bit ironic for what we'll talk about later, but we'll get to that. They went on a 14-game win streak in February, finished the season with 64 wins. That's still a franchise record to this day, even counting OKC. Only problem though, that wasn't the most wins in the NBA that year. Most years it probably would have been, but the Chicago Bulls rattled out 72 wins, which was an NBA record at the time.
You had your chance in 94, Seattle.
Yep.
The bad man is back. Still though, Gary Payton won Defensive Player of the Year. Interestingly enough, became the first point guard to win Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, back then it was pretty much exclusively a big man's awards, but that just showed how great Gary Payton was as a perimeter defender. Both he and Shawn Kemp made second team All-NBA. A little weird that a 64-win team didn't have a single first teamer All-NBA.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess you had like Karl Malone, Olajuwon, Jordan. Obviously, it was a tough year to make first team All-NBA. In the playoffs, first round, they'd match up against the 39-win Sacramento Kings, so this should be a breeze. First game, though, would be without Shawn Kemp because he was suspended due to getting in a fight during the last game of the regular season.
Really smart.
Yeah,
there.
really smart move there. They'd still win game 1, 97-85, even without Shawn Kemp. But then game 2, he comes back, and Mitch Richmond ends up torching them for 37, and they lose 90-81. And we got a tie series after 2 games in Seattle.
And the ghost of playoff pass are coming back up. Like, Mitch Richmond just dropped 37 on your head, but Seattle took care of business. They won games 3 and 4, took the series. The second round, they got defending champion Houston Rockets and Hakeem Olajuwon, and they bodied them, gave them the work, swept them 4-0. Game 2, they hit 23s. That was an NBA record at the time. Now it feels like it happens once a week.
Yeah, that's every other playoff game nowadays, but at the time, that was crazy. Shawn Kemp and Gary Payton both just balled out, and how about limiting Hakeem Olajuwon, the defending champion, to 18.3 points a game?
Conference finals, they matched up with the Stockton and Malone Utah Jazz. Game 1, hammered Utah, 102-72, 6 Sonics in double figures. They won a close one in Game 2, 91-87. Utah responded in Game 3, bodied them by 20, 96-76. The Sonics, though, in Game 4 survived 88-86. Stockton had a chance to win the game with a 3, but it came up just short, so you're thinking, all right, just gotta win one more game. Well, that's easier said than done.
Yeah, I mean, the Seattle Supersonics had to scare their fan base one more time, because in Game 5, they had a chance to win the series, make it to the finals. They're at their place in Key Arena, the new arena, but they'd lose the game. Gary Payton had a chance to tie the game at the end, but he'd miss it. Then they'd go back to Utah, where the Jazz took care of business, just dominated 118-83. This set up a win-or-go-home Game 7 to make it to the finals. And this game came down to the wire. Shawn Kemp hit some clutch free throws late, and the mailman did not deliver. He choked the game with 2 free throws at the end, and the Sonics survived to advance to their first finals since 1979.
And who was waiting for them in the NBA Finals? Only the 72-win Chicago Bulls. You know, the team that had just set the record for the most wins in the regular season, widely regarded as the best team in NBA history. And George Karl made the brilliant decision to put Hershey Hawkins on Michael Jordan to start the series instead of Gary Payton. Baffling.
Utterly baffling.
I don't care. The reason was that apparently Payton had a calf injury and he wanted to save him for the offensive end. This is one of the dumbest coaching gaffes you will ever see.
It might be, off the top of my head, the worst one in NBA history. Game 1 in Chicago, the Bulls won comfortably, 107-90. Jordan put up 28 on 9 of 18 shooting, so a solid game, but for Jordan in the finals, that's kind of just average. Game 2, the Bulls led most of the game. They were up 80-67 with 9 minutes to go. The Sonics came back. They cut it down to 4 with 46 seconds left. The problem is Steve Kerr missed a shot. They let Dennis Rodman get an offensive rebound, and that was his 11th of the game. 11th just offensive rebound. He had 20 rebounds in total. That is a finals record still to this day.
Probably scored like 4 points too.
Probably did.
Coming back to Seattle though, a must win for the Sonics, obviously back against the wall. They start the game down 13-2 and trailed 34-16 after the first quarter. This game was never close at all. The Bulls won by 22. Jordan dropped 36. Luke Longley had 19, which is like, what can you do?
That's just embarrassing. And after being down 0-3, George Karl was like, you know what? Maybe now I should put Gary Payton on Michael Jordan. You were down 0-3. Let's just try something new. Let's try it eventually.
Try something new. He's only the best perimeter defender in the NBA. Maybe we should put him on the other team's best player.
Yeah, that might help. Immediately, though, Gary Payton, who would have thought, on Jordan, was giving him fits. He was fronting Jordan. They were sending double teams when he caught the ball in the post. So it was looking like finally making the adjustment was helping them out. The Sonics started the game up 18-9. Key Arena was just rocking. The Bulls did cut into the lead. It was only a 4-point lead after the end of the first, but the Sonics outscored the Bulls 28-11 in the second quarter. They'd end up winning the game 107-86. And Jordan, 23 points on 19 shots. Who would have thought that Gary Payton would be a good matchup for Jordan?
Who would have thought a guy literally nicknamed the Glove
Right.
would be the best option to put on Mike? Not me.
Yeah, not me.
Not me.
Game 5 also in Seattle because, again, you know, the old finals 2-3-2 format. This game was back and forth throughout, but with around 6 minutes left in the fourth, the Sonics closed it out, got their second win of the series, kept their season alive. Jordan was fine in this game, 26 points on 50% shooting, but at least he didn't drop 40 on you.
Game 6, though, is where the series would end. Bulls basically controlled the entire game. They led by double digits for most of it. They ended up winning 87-75. Once again, though, Mike wasn't great. He had 22 points, 5 of 19 shooting. So who knows what would have happened if George Karl just would have put Gary Payton on him to start the series. This could have been one of the biggest upsets in NBA history.
I mean, the first 3 games when Mike wasn't being guarded by Payton, he scored 31 points per game, 46% shooting from the field. Last 3 games guarded by Gary Payton, 23.7 points per game on 36.7% field goal shooting. So you tack off 7 points per game and almost 10 from his field goal percentage.
Yep, and they went 2-1 in those games.
Makes you wonder. George Karl's a idiot.
Yeah. Following off season, it wasn't just George Karl who was making dumb decisions, because the front office decided to give Jim McIlvaine a 7-year, $33 million contract. So you're probably thinking, this is like a young up-and-comer, maybe averaged like at least 10 points the previous season. No, the dude averaged 2.3 points a game in 15 minutes the previous season for the Washington Bolts.
So you told me about this when you said, yeah, they gave Jim McIlvaine this 7-year, $33 million contract. My honest reaction was, who?
Right.
I never heard of him. Never heard of him.
And Shawn Kemp was pissed off about this, because now Shawn Kemp, the guy who led them to the finals, who'd been an all-star, who'd done everything to build this team up, was basically making the same amount of money as this bum. It's harsh, but it's true.
No, it's not harsh at all, because it's factual.
He still had a decent season, Shawn Kemp did. He put up 18.7 points a game and 10 rebounds. The Sonics won 57 games, but they'd get knocked out in the second round by the Houston Rockets. This was the Charles Barkley, Hakeem Olajuwon, Drexler Houston Rockets. And at that point, basically the rift between Shawn Kemp and the organization was done for. They had to trade him the following season for Vin Baker. Still were pretty good with Vin Baker. They won 61 games, but once again, in the playoffs, they just couldn't get it done. They beat the Timberwolves in the first round, but Shaq just ate on them in the second round and knocked them out in 5.
Yeah, tough in 98, because for anyone who doesn't know, in 1998, there were 3 teams in the West that won 60-plus games.
That's crazy.
It's insane. Like, the West and the NBA as a whole was so top-heavy around this time. And, it sucks because, this was such a really good team, but it's a problem with, every good team in the 90s, it feels like. It's like that guy number 23 in Chicago, just always waiting for you.
So what team do you guys want to see next in this series? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please consider giving a like, and hey, while you're here, check out some of our other content as well. And don't forget to subscribe to Synthetic Sports.